Hi guys, I'm Brad and welcome to the Great Hollywood Rewrite, where we take a look at some of cinema and TV's most troublesome titles and have a poke around under the hood. I'm joined by John. Hi John.
Hey Brad.
This week our audience selected film is Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from 2008. It was directed by Spielberg, a screenplay by David Koepp, and the story by George Lucas and Jeff Nathanson. But before we get stuck into raiding the irrationally complicated tomb of an interdimensional species, if you haven't done so already, check out our website, thescriptdepartment.net, for all our latest projects, including script readings from our cache of screenwriters. Also, you can follow us on social media, hit the links in the description, and subscribe to our podcast. Just search for The Script Department wherever you get your podcasts for daily episodes. So, John, Indy 4.0. Some films are released badly and then they become cult classics over time because people really realise they love them. Others are released and they do quite well, make a bit of money, and then they get panned over time. Now, I know you've got opinions on Indy 4 and which category you may put that in, but why don't you tell us about your indie education and experience?
So Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite movie of all time. Watch it every Christmas. I've bought the DVDs, I bought the Blu-rays, I bought the 4K bundle on Apple over Christmas. I love Indiana Jones. I was raised on James Bond movies and old World War II shoot 'em up movies. Had a fascination for ancient history growing up and myths and legends and stuff like that. And this to me was the guy who did Jurassic Park, another one of my favorite movies, the guy who did Star Wars, another one of my favorite movies, coming together to make a James Bond fighting Nazis, protecting ancient history movie. It is like somebody went into my brain and just, made the most perfect movie for me. I love Indiana Jones. I love Temple of Doom. I love Last Crusade. Was all in for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. A bunch of us at work decided to go see it kind of spur of the moment on opening night. And when we got to the cinema, there was a big sign that said sold out. We realized half of us had forgotten to book our tickets. Half of us had booked their tickets, so we all had to go our separate ways. And they went to see Indiana Jones, and we went to see Cassandra's Dream, the Woody Allen movie with Colin Farrell and Ewan McGregor. What a different movie that was. And because Woody Allen movies are quite quiet compared to Indiana Jones, we were in this big kind of chain kind of a multiplex cinema where there was just loads of screens playing Indiana Jones, and we're in the one screen not playing Indiana Jones, and so we're surrounded by the thumping bass line of action the whole time, and you could tell half the people in this movie theater were like, I don't know, it felt like there was like an age gap between, like, there was the people who wanted to see this movie and the people who didn't want to see this movie but had no choice because they'd decided Friday night was movie night and Indiana Jones was so. Yeah. Anyway, my whole experience with that, I came out of the movie theater, people were complaining about the movie for days afterwards. Everyone was complaining about the movie, and I'm the kind of person where because Indiana Jones was so special to me, I really didn't want an excuse for people to be talking crap about it to me at the water cooler kind of, and so I didn't go see it in the cinema, and I waited until the DVD came out when all the conversations had died down, because people were doing that with the Star Wars prequels, and I was enjoying the Star Wars prequels, and everybody was kind of dissing them, and it did kind of affect and put me off Star Wars for many years, and I really didn't want that to happen with Indiana Jones. So I stepped away from it, and then I got on DVD. I remember watching, and I had a lot of fun watching it, but my expectations were very measured, and I could see exactly what people were talking about. Now, we've done a conversation about Prometheus last week. We might have issues with it, but we love that film. The Dark Knight Rises, I've lots of issues with the kind of the writing of that, but I can watch that film again. To this day, I'd say I've only watched Kingdom of the Crystal Skull maybe twice or three times. And
could you bring yourself to rewatch it for this podcast.
Maybe after this, but I know the film very well. Like I can, these films stay in my brain really well, so I didn't have to rewatch it for this. But it's I bought, when I bought the Blu-rays, I didn't watch it again. It's the one, I don't know if the disc on that, in that box works. I never popped it in, and I'm not like that. I'll be the person that will watch everything, and I didn't. So I don't know. It would take a lot, I think, for me to go back to this film, and that's saying something.
There's a something. There's a stigma with this film, a big one. And it could have, I mean, originally the whole thing was supposed to be 5 films anyway, and it turned into a trilogy after Last Crusade. But there's a big stigma with this film, and it came out at a weird time. Like, we probably won't talk too much about the CGI because we're talking about the script here, but it was at the end of that period, late 90s, early to mid 2000s, where there were a few big films. CGI wasn't quite up to scratch because they were doing things, we were pushing into the next level, and you can see it. You're like, oh, they've gone a bit too far with this kind of thing. It looks too processed, too clean. So it was at that period, which I don't think helped it at all. But also there was, at the time, 2008 was when so many internet reviews and, podcasters, God bless them, they came out to review the film. So there was a dearth of bad reviews, like personal bad reviews from people rather than critics, and that was new. And I think that, initially it made a buttload of money. It cost a lot of money to make, but it made a lot of money. It was like nearly 800 million, I think, or 700 million, and it did okay, but it got pretty badly received afterward. It was like everyone got hyped up, everyone went in, came out and went, it was okay. That was it. Yeah, it was okay, and it got some decent initial ratings. But since then, it's not done well. People have gone, actually, no, I was just hyped up. I did not enjoy that film.
But I think back on it, and as a part of me that does wonder how much did people really want an Indiana Jones sequel. I remember it was the MTV Video Music Awards, if you remember those. And Shia LaBeouf came on stage, because I used to watch them back then. And Shia LaBeouf came on stage, and the way they would have like guests, or the presenters would also be there to promote something, like the star of the new up and coming Fast and Furious film, and it's like quick promotion, and the star of the new Indiana Jones film, Shia LaBeouf comes out and he revealed the title, Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There wasn't a trailer or anything like that, which you would have now to reveal the title, maybe. And he says it, and it was like nobody cared. I think he was expecting some sort of like standing ovation or something, and it was just, and maybe that wasn't the place to do it. But I just always remember, like, that was the first time anyone heard the title of the film.
Yeah,
and it just fell on deaf ears, really. And I remember thinking, well, that sets a great, like, that's, you're off to a flying start, aren't you? And I just, when Lucasfilm when Disney bought Lucasfilm, I don't think they were thinking that much about Indiana Jones. I do think Indiana Jones is a franchise that, like Blade Runner 2 didn't do that well compared to, people. I think there was an expectation it would do better. Critics loved it. Everybody went to see it, loved it. Yeah. But who cares about Blade Runner anymore? It's not that bold and inventive anymore. And I think we've seen so many copycats of Indiana Jones down through the years. It's not the best of it anymore, I think.
I agree with that. There's been plenty of copycat sort of films based on that, but likewise, Indy was based on those serials from the 30s and the 40s. Like, that was it, and it works. Like, initially they got a DP from the era to film the films, and it looked like it was great. And I do get that, and I think it's because of the nature of how it was made, it suffered from its own inception. So there was I think there was a want for an indie film, but not necessarily after 20 years. or it would have been a different want. So the same script was in circulation for, I think it was 15 years, I read, and they kept taking lumps out of it and moving it on to the next writer, and then taking a few more lumps out of it and just taking those hooks into the next script. And it's, yeah, you can see the edges in this thing. You can see that script. You're like, okay, they should have just been that and started again. Maybe had a thought of keep the era or the tone or whatever, but they were just taking lumps and moving it on, which I think is where some of the issues come. And we've got a list of things that we're going to discuss. So I think there's five of them. So the first one is Indy himself has almost become a caricature. He's absolutely invincible in this film. He's indestructible, but he's older. So it doesn't it's become like the Terminator version of himself, but because I guess he'd become a godlike character, and they were kind of feeding into that. So that's what one of the issues. It feels a little bit weird. Second one's the villains. There isn't too much characterization around these guys. We don't know a whole lot about them. So when they do something, or they die, or they reveal something, I think it falls a little bit flat. The third one's we could call it the Mutt problem. So the father-son storyline and the character that is Indy's son. When it was revealed to the characters themselves, and it felt a little bit imbalanced, that they didn't use it as much as they could. It just felt like something that was going on in the background when it could have been like a huge thing. The fourth point, we're going to call them the Lucas problems. I mean, I love George Lucas. I love what he's created and the gifts he's given to the world. But I think you can see, like we said, the script has a number of things that has been dragged through from either other films or the original script, and there are a lot of them, and a lot of them feel like they could have been some of the problems because they're trying to keep them in there for various reasons. And then the fifth is the too many having the amount of plot points and side characters they do for a comeback where you want. You just want you want Indy, and you do want some complication, but not just chaos. So there are five big points there. I mean the first one was Indy himself being this indestructible He-Man of a history teacher. Like what what are your thoughts on Supernatural Indy?
It's they set that kind of they create that impression so early on in the film. The ridiculousness of the action sequence in Area 51 at the beginning. He's flying around the place and landing in jeeps, and he does that whole thing where he flicks the whip up in order to swing from one truck, and then he lands in between two other guys, and it's like, damn, I thought that was closer, or something like that. And it's everything is so choreographed. It's very Phantom Menace in terms of the way the action is done, and it's the other films never really had that. When Indiana Jones in Raiders, for example, when he swings across, the branch will break, or he'll you can see like his whole spine bending, as he tries desperately to pull himself on, and you kind of feel like that's real Harrison Ford. Like he hasn't practiced that stunt enough, and so he's like desperately trying to salvage the shot, and it just gives it all a sense of realism. In this, I think everything was, and maybe it's because he was older, and so they're relying maybe more on CG, or they're relying more on choreography rather than a kind of an element of natural behavior. But yeah, that was that's the feeling that I get when I'm thinking about that point. Is I'm thinking about how it doesn't have the kind of scrappiness to it that it feels like Marvel action. And I love Marvel action, but Iron Man can do everything in perfect, and Captain America as well, because their muscles or the suit or whatever allows them to be able to do everything perfectly. Indiana Jones shouldn't be able to. And then, the atomic bomb and the fridge, and that just, if you can survive that, you can survive anything, surely, right?
Fridge,
they very clearly, right from the beginning, don't do themselves any favors in that regard.
So I get how they got there with Indy being this ultimate legend of modern cinema. Like everyone knows the music, everyone knows who he is, everyone knows what he does, what he wears, how he talks. He's this big, larger than life star. But in the first three films, he's really fallible in a very natural way. Like his planning sometimes is fallible. His ethics can be fallible. Like his physicality is, he gets his ass handed to him a bunch of times. I know they kind of do that in this film, but you never feel like he's going to lose. So they replicate the fight from Raiders with handlebar moustache guy, a massive dude in the airport on the airstrip, and arguably he wins that fight through luck because he's on the deck and that plane happens to churn the guy up in the propeller, right? This one, no. Yes, he gets knocked over a few times. Oh, he finds a stick. You know, he gets, you know, a few lucky legs up in his fist fights, but he's just like the amount of times he falls into a vehicle and empties it of people. Whereas again in Raiders, it took him forever. He had to go underneath Buster Keaton style. He had to go underneath the thing, and it was just that was perfect. It's like okay, I get it. That was a hard fight, but now he just like scoops guys out. I think it's twice he empties a truck out, and it's just he's infallible and indestructible. And I think we wanted to see, or I wanted to see anyway, an older Indy and how he has to compensate to be 20 years older, and he's 20 years older in the film. It's not just Harrison Ford.
Well, you know, the problem is that you're this is an action genre, and it's not like Fast and Furious where a lot of it is driving vehicles and stuff like that, where, you know, arguably you could be doing that, you know, right into, you know, older age. But it's the idea that, yeah, you're swinging from one, you know, ledge to another with a whip, you know, that you're not even using a proper grapple hook or anything like that. You know, there's a lot of like this is a young man's adventure, you know, like a young person's adventure, and he's got Mutt on his side. See, it's almost like they didn't want to commit to the idea of, all right, you sit this one out, Indy. Mutt is leading the way on this action sequence or something like that. It's you can't have it both. You can't have Indiana, and it's the one thing that I've thought, like with the new one that's, you know, I think they're filming at the moment, or maybe have wrapped filming. What are those action sequences going to look like? Because he's even older. It's been over 10 years.
So I read an interview with Mads Mikkelsen, and the headline was Harrison Ford is a beast of a man, and I was like, oh no, they've fallen out. But it was clickbait headline because he was saying he's so physically fit in his mid to late 70s. I think they did a 16-hour day shoot, finished filming at 5 a.m. I think it was in like the mountains or a jungle or something. And Ford hops on his mountain bike and does 20 or 30K, I think. Mikkelsen was like, what? Like, so I think he's definitely still got it. He'll be doing stuff like that until he's breathed his last breath. I mean,
it needs to translate. It needs to translate into the film, though. That's the only thing, because you know, there's no point in training for weeks and weeks and weeks to get into shape, or months training for months to get into shape, if at the end of the day it's going to look like if everything is kind of this over the top kind of choreography that protects him. And yeah, like Indiana Jones wasn't afraid to take his shirt off in those other movies, you know, or his clothes got ripped to shreds. Like, think about what his shoes were like at the end of the mine chase, in Temple of Doom. You know, it's the mine cart chase, and it's, you know, there's like he loses parts of himself along the way. And he's rebuilt then in the next movie, and that's okay. And, you know, you mentioned the kind of old pulp origins of this. That's the great thing about Indiana Jones. You could have him lose an arm in this movie, And in the next movie, he can just have two arms again because it just happens in a different timeline. Or not a different timeline, but different year. Like Temple of Doom is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And not a lot of people realize that. It is set before that. Last Crusade, with the exception of the one reference to the Ark of the Covenant in Last Crusade, you could arguably have that as the very first film. You can watch them out of order, and it won't affect it too much. They never beat the Nazis. Like it's not like there's a historical discontinuity in these films. You can just watch them in any order you want. So you can do what you want to Indiana Jones, but they did seem like they were protecting him too much in this film.
I think so. I mean, I think the point I was trying to make about Ford, he's still an animal, right? He's still fit as anything, but that doesn't mean Indy has to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I kept, when I rewatched it yesterday, and I kept thinking about, there's an opportunity here, and I know it's cheesy as hell, but the relationship in Lethal Weapon, it became a trope of its own, right? The young cop and the old cop. I'm too old for this shit. I've got a few days to retirement, or all of that stuff became a big trope because it was so big in that film, and it worked so well. Yeah. It spawned the buddy cop. Everything. It spawned so many different things. Spawned Shane Black, of course, and it was just there was something in that story that works. And it's, the older guy, Murtaugh wearing a girdle, having back problems, and then like Riggs doing stuff that he can't do. And then eventually Riggs ages out of it, and he's also doing the same thing. And it's like, there were one or two lines in this film about that. Like, oh, it's not as easy as it used to be, or we're not as young as we used to be, but doesn't look like it. It looks like they're nails in this film, and they're getting thrown around, jumping out of vehicles, and they haven't slowed down, and they look clean. They look very clean. Like his jacket is perfect in the last scene. It's like that's just come off a hanger. Like at the end of Temple of Doom, like he's shredded. Like everything's shredded. Like he's almost nude.
And it comes back to that whole. I think that part of that comes back to what you were talking before about that kind of where we were in terms of filmmaking back when that film came out. I did think there was a tendency to just make films. There was that moment where we went where everything was digital and everything had that polish to it because we were shooting digital. And we don't have that grain anymore or anything like that. So let's just make everything as clean as we can. And there was that trend, I think, for a while where everything was looking really clean and polished. Transformers as well was the same and everything. Ironically, a lot of Shia LaBeouf movies at that period suffered from that, like just overly polished kind of.
Well, a lot of them were Spielberg involved, weren't they?
Yeah, I think
Spielberg went through his period of doing that.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it. And I think I'd be surprised if they didn't shoot 35mm film this time. Maybe they did shoot 35mm. Maybe I'm incorrect.
Do you know what? I think weirdly, I read. Don't quote me on this, but I think they did use film, and then they polished it up, like they polished the hell out of it, and it was just like it was weird. Particularly as they were talking about in the build-up. I remember the build-up. They're like, we're going to do so much we can with practical effects because there was obviously a lot of backlash against. Like all the CGI in the prequel trilogy for Star Wars, and all there were a number of films that weren't necessarily Lucas and Spielberg movies. It was happening a lot, and they'd said we're going to do practical effects, and yeah, I mean they were swinging on stuff, but everything around them was not there, and you could see it. I mean, if you think about how it was done, it was masterful how they did all of that stuff, but you can see it. You can see it. It was too much for the technology at the time. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I love seeing Indy beat the hell out of people and swing around on his whip. It's great fun. I really enjoyed watching it. But from a script point of view, I think there was a trick missed with not having him older and fallible and struggling.
Well, I think you proposed the solution there, which is you do the Lethal Weapon formula, the buddy cop, the older, younger, and it doesn't have to be. And I think rather than just being Mutt being the extremely younger character compared to Indy, it could be. I love the Mel Gibson. I love the age difference between Riggs and Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon. I love that age difference. It's not so they're not so different. One is just a few years behind the other, and it's like, yeah, laugh all you want, but it's not going to be long before you're like me. And then when you watch Lethal Weapon 4, it is very much the one character helping the other to get used to retirement or get used to their age. So
yeah, I think there's just so much, richness in that, and you can do the callbacks to other films then, because if it is Mutt that's the guy, he's doing the stuff that Indy used to be able to do. What if he does swing over a snake pit or escape from wherever else, or dodge a rolling boulder, and Indy had to be saved? He couldn't make it, and he's like, I used to do that. I did that first. There's a lot of richness and comic relief that can come from that kind of thing, because watching it as a human being, we're either there, or it's going to happen to us, or it's already happened, and it's going to happen to everyone.
But one of the things I love so much, one of my favorite moments in the original trilogy is when in Last Crusade, when he's bigging up Brody to the Nazis, and he's like, "You'll never find him. He speaks 10 languages. He knows people in every village from here to wherever. He'll blend in. You'll never see him again." And then cut to, he's in a suit walking around in his village going, does anybody speak English? And it's just hilarious. And but I love the idea that they have there are 20 movies that never got made, probably. No, I know they're not, but there's potentially in another universe somewhere 20 movies of just Brody and Indy doing their thing. You could reboot the Young Indiana Jones thing and just have it be Indy and Brody as young men, just clumsily fumbling their way through the different adventures. And they had that with John Hurt. I get the feeling that John Hurt is just a more dignified Brody in this. Like, yes. Before he was driven mad by the Crystal Skull, I feel like he would have been like Brody, but just a little bit more street smart, maybe, because he has some beautiful pearls of wisdom to share in that movie, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I think you could have easily done the Riggs and Murtaugh thing with John Hurt and Indiana Jones, and audiences would have eaten that up. And instead, he's relegated to just someone to rescue.
Yeah, I love the Marcus Indy thing. That's you can. It's sort of like a Magnum PI with Higgins, and it's great. I mean, we're going back to the 80s a lot here, and but
the precedent is there for this solution. I think it's not. It wouldn't feel like, oh, this feels like it's a Lethal Weapon movie, not an Indiana Jones movie. No, I think the character dynamics are there to explore this a little bit more and make Indiana Jones not have to be responsible for saving the day by himself.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of nailed that one. Really, they've made him too much of an archetype. Basically, they've followed the character of Indy and gone, right, how can we supercharge that? But I think that probably moves us on to the point too about the villains, because they're very archetypal and they're relatively two-dimensional. There is something about them missing. So in Raiders, Belloc, the kind of quasi antagonist, because he's not the big bad, but he's helping them out. There is a very, very quick way of finding out they've got history together, they're in competition, they have worked together and hated one another for a very, very long time. And he's, does Marion like him somehow? There's something going on there where it's like, this is the evil version of Indy, but there's points you don't find him entirely evil, because he is cowering from the Nazis, and it's like you feel compromised. So, but there's none of that in these characters.
Belloc is. I don't know if it's ever explicitly stated he is. I mean, he must be Jewish if he's doing the Jewish ritual at the end, and he, but I don't think they ever really explore that corner of the character. But I love that complexity. Like, this is a guy who knows that this is a guy who, if he didn't die at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, would potentially as dark as this might sound, would potentially have been sent to a concentration camp in a few years
Yeah.
by the Nazis. And and here he is working with the Nazis like that. There is something brilliantly complex and compromised, I think, about his look. I mean, it's a movie character, so it's not going to be as, I don't know, as it's going to, you're dealing kind of black and white ideas, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he you kind of feel like you shouldn't be doing this, because even if you are somebody who doesn't care who you work with, you must know that they despise your very being, your very presence.
Yes.
And I love that there's this kind of subtle context being brought into this that makes Belloq a wonderfully complicated character. And you learn about his family, like, it's my family estate, this is my family label and everything. And you kind of feel like, that you've come from money. I'm guessing you were educated in the best private schools, and you're not Indy in the in the way Indy was raised, But yeah, like you said,
the deal with the devil thing is that's a huge thing. I know they don't necessarily dive straight into his Jewish heritage, but either way, those guys are the rising evil that need to be stopped. Like, and he's made a deal with that devil for various reasons: glory, money. It's not just and power, but it's not just like the Ray Winston character where it feels like it's just for a bit of cash. And it's not. Yeah. It's, I know I said money, but it's it's the power that comes with it for Belloq. He's trying to align himself with the what could be the New World Order, whereas the Russians in this, it's just there was a Cold War. There's these faceless guys. I mean, for example, like the giant Russian in that, what's his name, Dovchenko, I think. He should have ended. He should end Indy the second he touches him. He's so big, like he's just this monster, and we know very little about him. We don't. Not that we need to know everything, but there's no. He's just the big Russian that shouts orders and obeys his commander. There is, as the sidekick of the big bad, he should have something more. And then the same with Blanchett. We get very little for her. She likes mind control, and she's Russian, and she's sort of sword fighting, and she's good at being a Russian agent, and that's kind of it. That's all we get. We don't think we get much else on her, and it's simple stuff, like just a little few extra lines on what her motivations are and what her history may have been to have brought her here. But no, we don't get any of that, do we? I think there's something missing.
I think the problem is we're introduced to the villain way too soon. Like in Raiders, you meet Belloq, but you don't meet the Nazis straight away. Belloq leads them to the Nazis then, or Belloq is our way into the Nazis. I mean, I know they show up at Marion's bar in Nepal, but it's in terms of Indy meeting the Nazis, it's through Belloq, and it takes a while. Whereas in this, it's if you consider that Mac, Ray Winston's character, is the let's say he's the, I don't know, the Belloq of this story. Let's say, I don't know, he's not, but let's say he's not the biggest baddie of the whole movie. I mean, he's very poorly written in this, so like my comparison isn't really great here, but it's the best I've got to work with.
I guess he's kind of like Salah, but with a bad bit in him. So he's kind of like the historical buddy, and he's gone bad kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. But he, let's say if he was the one that led us to the Russians then in Act 2, that I think, it wouldn't feel like we're being as shortchanged. I think the problem is that in most movies you meet a villain at the beginning, but they lead you to something bigger later on, and the stakes get the villainous stakes raise and raise and raise, and the villain, the logistical hurdles to beat the villains become harder and harder and harder, because the villains become, oh, it turns out they were working for this person all along or something like that. And it's not. It's like very first scene, we're introduced to every character that's going to be in this movie right to the very end. The only two characters who show up outside of Act 1 are are heroes, like Marion and John Hurt's character, Oxley. So they're doing it the other way around. Introduce Marion and Oxley early and introduce us to Cate Blanchett later. Like, make us excited to want to meet her later because we've heard so much about her. Build her up. You don't just drop the and you've got Cate Blanchett, one of the greatest actors of all time in this movie. That's fantastic.
Yes.
And it just feels like,
I don't think she had a lot to work with here.
No.
I think she would have been rewritten a number of times. Maybe she wasn't a woman to start with. I think there's evidence of rewriting of that character, so that there are holes in her, and I think that there's a huge thing missing here. That there was the Second World War in between the two, Last Crusade and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They talk about it. They say Indy was a war hero. Great. But that's it. Like, I would have just liked to have seen someone salute him at some point, because it was only a few years ago, and they recognise him, and he would be really uncomfortable with that. He'd be like, oh, stop it, kind of thing. You can imagine that he'd be uncomfortable being that guy. And same for the Russians. They came through the war. They lost more civilians and soldiers than anyone, and they felt that, and this is how the Cold War started. They rolled over Berlin, and it was just like, there's none of that in this. You just go, oh, they're the bad guys. There's no discussion about why people hate one another, and I don't know. There's an empty feeling to the antagonists in this film.
I think Cate Blanchett's character, Irina Spalko. I mean, I should know her name. I'm a diehard indie fan. I don't, that I'm on IMDb here. That's how I'm getting this stuff. I think Irina's character would be more interesting. Yeah, if we touched on, let's say, because she would have been a very young woman at the start of, like a very, very young woman at the start of the Second World War. And it would have been nice to hear something about, maybe her father was killed in a siege or something like that, or in a famous battle, or maybe like she's lost everything, but she became a hero of the Cold War, or a hero, because she received the medal. Like she's a 2-time recipient or whatever of the Hero of,
which is not expositional at all that she shouts.
Yeah. I think what would have been great is if she had been like one of those famous female snipers that really played a huge role in the success of the war. Something like that, where and then in the jungle, when they're making their way through the jungle, maybe somebody gets shot, and you do this massive zoom right over to the other side of the forest, and guess who's peering down through a scope?
Yes,
and
I want that. That's good.
Like that's something good. Like that, where like you're being hunted in the jungle by the most feared woman in the Second World War.
Yeah, she's the man. She's manhunter. She's that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think the thing is, there's a common ground. I love where you get that conflict, because there seems to be a connection between the antagonist and the protagonist. So there's a common ground. They got battered by the Nazis a lot, and they would have gone through a lot. And you could just imagine a scene between her and Indy where they, maybe they're in the back of a truck or something, and they're talking about, I went through that too, and there's a connection. I think with Elsa in Last Crusade, there's a connection there. I think he obviously fancies her, but like this, there's something there, and he wants to try and save her. And arguably, she doesn't need saving at all, but there can still be a connection between them. And I think
I'll do you one better, even, right? Her whole psychic deal. have it be a case where we don't actually know if she's psychic. It's a legend that developed around her because
Mm.
she always seemed to know where the target would be. She
Yes.
always, she's a sniper and she never missed her shot. And it's almost like she could guide the bullet with her mind. And it's almost like, she always knew where people were going to be. And she always knew exactly like when to pull the trigger and all that kind of stuff. And she developed a reputation. People thought like, that she can get into the mind of her victim. She can make her victim like walk out into the into the square and she'll pick you off, something like that. Whatever, you can phrase it better, but it's like I liked the idea of the psychic connection because I had read somewhere, I don't know how truthful it is, but I had read that the Russians had been experimenting with that stuff in the 50s. And so the idea of that, I thought, oh, okay, they're taking something and just building on it. Okay, cool. But the problem is, she's a real psychic. Psychic abilities are a real thing in this world. Now, I know the Cup of Christ and its healing abilities is also a real thing in this world. And, magic stones and the Ark of the Common is also a real thing in this world. But I kind of feel like you're moving too heavily into X-Men territory now.
Yeah.
And I think it would be better if there's this, we've all heard stories about her, and no one really believes them. But then occasionally she knows stuff, and it's like, how does she know that? Oh, because Mac has just betrayed us. Oh crap, And like, you don't have to lean on it. You don't have to wait so long. It can be
she could debunk it. She could debunk it. Like we hear, eventually it comes out. Like you can read my mind, and she'd be like, "Oh, that's just rubbish. I'm just thorough.
Yeah,
I'm just really thorough and meticulous about what I do."
It's funny that you American agents always seem to, you can't see the obvious when it's right in front of you, and then Mac turns his back on them then or something. Speaking of Mac, right? Mac doesn't work in this film at all. I don't know why they cast I love Ray Winston, nothing against him, but the character itself, the idea of it being a British agent, no need for it at all. What they should have done was, I know the Russians and the Americans never fought side by side in terms of like guns at the ready going into battle together, but they were allies in the strict sense, and they also were lots of relationships that would have been built up, particularly in the end of the war, particularly the East-West kind of scramble for for recruiting agents or scientists and talent, let's say, and expertise and all that kind of stuff after the war. So I would have preferred, if rather than it being Mac as a British agent, have him be a Russian who worked very closely with Indy in East Germany. At the end of the war, have it be a situation where they became good friends, where forget about flags, forget about borders, forget about walls. We're just like we came to a common understanding. But they've taken my family and they've forced me at gunpoint to go and exploit and use my friendship with Indy to get him, to lure him into a false sense of security so we can catch him. And now it's like, I'm really sorry. And he's like, you son of a bitch, And then later, end of Act 2, he can sacrifice himself to save Indy and let Indy and Mutt and all them go. It would be very simple, a bit cheesy, but...
I like that. I'm going to raise you a Russian double agent.
Go.
And put in an East German double agent.
Okay, perfect.
So he is possibly... he wouldn't have been a former Nazi. He would have been fighting against them. He would have been part of the resistance. But East Germany, controlled by Russia at the time, oppressed, unwillingly communist, it would have had a lot of conflict. So I like, maybe Ray Winston could do an East German accent, I don't know. But we'd also lose all the Jonesy, all of that constantly, which I don't know. Sometimes it was okay. I quite liked it.
But John Hurt can do that, because John Hurt is also British.
Oh yeah, there we go. He can do it. He'd probably do it, Jonesy. But yeah, I think that's a good call on Ray Winston's character.
The problem, I've said this before in a previous conversation somewhere. Mac's character, the constant jokes about him being a double agent, quadruple agent, whatever it is,
Mm.
feels like it's just hanging a lantern on bad writing. Like it's almost like we need to acknowledge that this is a bit ridiculous the way he keeps stabbing everybody in the back.
Hmm.
So it's almost like they're leaning into it with jokes to kind of mask the clumsiness of the writing. And I
Yeah,
always
I
say
think so.
if you have to hang a lantern over it, uh, then that is a red flag. And if you don't have time, then hang a lantern over it. But you're Lucas and Spielberg, and you've waited long enough. You can wait a bit longer to get this character
Yes.
right. You know. So
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit something on the fact that if we do turn him into a Russian or East German, and link it back to the war, he's got a clear motivation for what he's doing. We need that for Spalko. Like, she needs to have. Why is she trying to get that skull back? Why is she trying to get all that knowledge? Like, has she? Maybe it's something like because of what happened to her family and how she was used in the war. Like, she's lost faith in humanity and she needs to find something else. Is there another hook that we can figure out to really make her, to drive her there? Because she's hell bent on just getting there to get all the knowledge in the world and be the best, basically. And it's like it doesn't ring right. She needs a real hook to get her to do that, basically.
you know, they build her up how loyal she is to Russia and how loyal she is to Stalin, and you know she's received. Well, I mean, it's assumed she's loyal. She's received all these medals, and she's Stalin's favorite, and all that kind of stuff. But I think it'd be really interesting to show that actually she hates that regime,
Mm.
because not only would it be a chance for not only would it be very interesting to have a Russian character be anti-Stalin, you know, like a villainous character be
Mm.
anti-Stalin, that it would also, it could link into the past, like, you know, it's people like him and people like your president and people like everybody else. Like you draw, you know, it's you guys start wars and we all lose loved ones because of it.
Yeah.
And you know, and I my young adulthood, my teenage years, whatever, were spent, you know, being worked to death by Stalin's regime, and it was only because I was a good shot that suddenly I'm of interest.
Mm.
And you know, I was only a good shot because I had to protect our home uh from, you know, raiders or something. I don't know, you know, and it's,
Mm.
you build her up as a tragic character who wants revenge, and it's, I
Yeah.
want this power for me so that I can build a better world with this knowledge.
Yeah,
Because
I
isn't
think
that,
it's a Thanos thing, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
that belief, that pure, true belief in what you're doing. Although it might be villainous, you're trying to do something that you perceive is good, and the bad you do the good that you will do will outweigh the bad. And yeah, I think that could work really well for her. Like, you can imagine Indy almost thinking about it for a second, as he thought about, many things in with Elsa in Last Crusade. He considers it briefly, doesn't he? And it's
yeah,
like, yeah.
there is a precedent in those films where the person, you know, there's the regime that wants the power, but the person helping them, the, like, the benefactor, let's say, of the mission or whatever, um is the one who, like, they've got a long-term goal beyond the regime. Like in Last Crusade, the man
Mm.
who enlists India at the beginning, who turns out to be the villain, the guy who, you know, drinks the water at the end, he's like, well, Hitler can have it, but I'll be toasting my health long after he's gone the way of the dodo. You know, that's the line. And like he has a personal vision. So yeah, Stalin can have the skull, but I'm gonna be the one that's gonna be reshaping this world, not him. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that there's
Yeah,
definitely
that works.
precedent for it. And yeah, I love the idea, as you say, of Indiana Jones as well, almost being partially tempted by it. You know,
It's that temptation that
yeah,
just works so well, because there's a lack of emotional conflict in this, physical and ethical, and the conflict that we get is very clear. It's very black and white, but there's nothing muddying up it in the middle on an emotional level, um, which I think can take us into the father son storyline and the Mutt problem in this film. Like, I don't dislike the idea that they're trying to do here. And I I don't know, this is controversial, will be controversial for some people. I didn't entirely dislike the Mutt character. I think LaBeouf does a good job with what he's got there. Like he really goes for it with this character. For me, I was trying to hook it into something and why it's a problem, and it for it's the reveal to the characters about the paternity. Like it's very late. Nobody knows about it apart from Marion, who doesn't come till later in the film. And there's a few things that they might have just done earlier or differently that could have really used that, and that might have linked back to point one about Indy's infallibility and his near indestructibility. What if Mutt knew? What if Mutt always knew and he didn't want to tell him because he loved his, the dad that was it Ox? Because I don't think he met his British dad that died in the war. But it's there's a conflict within him that he doesn't want to accept Indy as his biological father, and he wins him over. There's there could be another layer to what's happening here. What are your opinions on Mutt?
I don't hate the idea that he's Indy's son. And I love the idea that Marion and Indy get married. I love that. I think there's something just really lovely about that. But I think the problem is they're going for the obvious, and it's I say this all the time. It's the low hanging fruit. Of course he's going to be the son, because you need if Shia LaBeouf was, the future of a lot of George Lucas's and Spielberg's plans for the next few years, Transformers and Indiana Jones and so on and so forth, then you need a logical reason for him to be in these movies beyond Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So let's just make him his son. It does feel like that's where it's coming from. We need somebody to pick up the hat at the end. And to me, I feel it would have been a far more interesting idea if he rejected I think what would have been more interesting if, and maybe, I don't know, but maybe the British father was actually the biological father, but he yearned for something more, and he saw this old picture of Marion and Indy in happier times, post Raiders or something like that, and thought, oh, maybe he's my father instead. Maybe I think it would have been more interesting if Mutt almost kind of wanted to rewrite his own history. And you play into that idea of history as an idea. Like, Mutt is not a student of history. Indy is. Indy knows, and Oxley knows about. They can wax lyrical about history and our histories and how it's tied to everyone else's histories and so on and so forth. And you can do that with the war, and you can do that with that shared experience, that shared trauma that everyone around the world would have gone through during the war. And you can then, and how we're all kind of connected from that, which ties into the aliens all being connected and so on and so forth and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then you can tie into the idea of it doesn't matter if he was your father or not. Yeah. Well, it kind of does, but you can have some sort of poetic idea there where, look, we can be friends. I don't have to be your father for us to be friends. And he's the next Short Round, or he's the next whoever, there's the waiter who gets killed at the beginning of Temple, and he says, we've been together on many missions, you and I, or many adventures, you and I, but I get the answer to the great unknown first.
Yeah.
This time I go first, that kind of thing. And I love that, there's history with these people. It's not just like a Bond girl who's just dropped into a movie, and then out again.
Yeah, I like the idea that there's the thought that he's Indy's son, but he's not. So maybe Indy could decide that early on. Maybe he figures out it's Marion's, because the second he finds out it's Marion's son, he could just be like, oh, he must be my son. That works out. Like the age of him works out. He must be my son. And it turns out he's not.
Yeah, but I think that's far more interesting.
But he could still take him in anyway. More so now than in in the mid 2000s that, the biology of a relationship is less, of a cornerstone to someone being family or a sibling. It's blended families are much more common now, and there is something in that, for example, the fact that he's good with a knife and he's good fighting and he's very action savvy and all this kind of stuff. It's almost like they're suggesting genetically in the original version of the film, genetically, that he's inherited something from Indy, and it's like, I'm not very similar to my dad. like, do you know what? And we have our similarities, of course we do, but there's a thing of nature versus nurture, and if he's never seen him, would he be that actiony and the spit of him, and Indy sees himself in him all the time? Maybe the hook of that is Indy keeps seeing himself in him and goes, yeah, this is definitely my boy, and he isn't.
Yeah,
but he takes him in anyway. He loves him like a son.
Yeah, and I think that's a far more interesting solution to it, because there's precedent for Indy being a father figure to so many different young men and boys, in these different movies, and then they go on their way, and then they part ways, and that's and they've had their adventure, and I think Mutt should have just been another one of them, and it just turns out you're the daughter or you're the son of the woman I love. That's the only difference,
I think you've just come up with another Freudian solution there. Could be a daughter. Doesn't have to be a son.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why not? Yeah,
do you know
what
I mean?
Yeah,
I think that would be quite interesting, particularly with the side rivalry with Spalko.
And now I'm annoyed because now I want that. Yeah, that's what I mean. Come on.
Yeah. So it's the daughter. Oh, there could be all sorts of like conflict in that, all sorts of like weird.
Yeah. And she could be, and we've talked about how you're like, he's like Indy, but actually, no. We love Marion so much in these films. Have her be like Marion. Have her be able to drink Marion under the table.
Yeah.
Like that would have been amazing. Like we see the first time we see this person, she's in a drinking game.
Yeah.
And she drinks somebody under the table, and it's amazing. Like, there you
go. What about if Indy kind of has the moment of clarity and realizes that she's his daughter when she argues him under the table. She argues with him and wins, and he's like, "Oh my god!"
And you know what? Audiences would be far less suspecting of that, because I think we're programmed as audience members to see like same-sex connections. I think like I bet you're the son, or like like you, like, I guarantee you, if you never knew anything about Phantom Menace and you just saw the little kid Jake Lloyd and said, which character is he going to be years later? Oh, Darth Vader, I bet you. We just make those connections in our head. Oh, Padme, she must be the mother of Princess Leia, because she's a woman in the story. Like, we make it's low-hanging fruit in terms of writing, and it's lazy writing, absolutely. That would have been a great way of subverting that kind of lazy audience expectation.
Well, I think it makes the age thing work as well.
Yeah,
that we want Indy to feel older, because it would be a very traditional thing to sort of like try and take in. So what, protect. What if he finds out his daughter, that she's his daughter, and he immediately starts to protect her from men and violence, and she's like, I don't need that, I don't need you, and he doesn't know what to do with it. There's a generational gap there.
You could have a wonderful comedic beginning of the second act or something like that, where it's in the university, it's like trying to protect her, and she's just totally not needing protection at all. She is the daughter of Marion Ravenwood. She fought Nazis barehanded. She doesn't need your help, Indy. And he's doing it because he's like, but I'm a dad and I should be doing it, And then you do the whole thing where he's not the dad, but it's
Yes.
okay because we are a blended family now moving forward. Because I still want him to marry Marion. I still want that.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
lovely, So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
That works.
there's your solution, and it gives so much weight. And yeah, as you said, you've got Irina then, and
So are we going for a female mutt, but also
Yeah.
that she's not his daughter,
I think so.
and he takes her in anyway?
I think that, yeah, because it's not like he's just taking in this stranger that he only met once. It's the daughter of Marion Ravenwood, and he's marrying Marion Ravenwood. So she's going to become a legitimate,
Stepdaughter,
yeah, it's a legitimate family relationship in terms of
It's sweet,
in cinema terms. It's not contrived, and your audience isn't going to have to try and figure out like, because I hate to say this, there are other characters in other movies, not Indiana Jones movies, but where you could almost imagine like almost hitting on her because she's a woman or something like that, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
You really want it to be very clear that this is, because Indiana Jones is a bit of a womanizer in his younger days, and you want this to be a situation where it's very clearly a family dynamic, and I think Marion is the key to that. In terms of the audience, I mean, obviously the story would dictate that, but you don't want the audience's imagination going down a road of expectation that isn't actually what you're trying to do. Yeah, look, I think that, to me, I love that. I think that's great.
So while we're talking about imagination, I think that kind of segues us into the Lucas problems point, because George Lucas has come up with some of the greatest stories in cinema history. Like the things that have come out of his mind, I will have with me until the day I die. Like, they're that important to me. In this film, there are a number of, I think some are confirmed and some we're just presuming here, are Lucas properties in the script, because he had that script that he was involved with for 15 years, and it kept getting rewritten and changed. And I can imagine that the bits that were originally really important, he's pushed through, and he's got a belief in them. Of course he's going to do that. It's his property, it's his script, it's his character. So there are a few things that have gone through in this script in all of the iterations, which are the MacGuffin, so the skull, the temple, the jungle chase, the nuke fridge, and then I don't know if the gophers were necessarily in the other scripts, but they are arguably a Lucas thing, I guess, potentially.
Did you mention the snake? Sorry, I can't.
I didn't mention the snake. No, so the snake.
Yeah, that's the big one for me, I think.
So there are a few things that have gone through here that have potentially muddied the script, because they were almost like anchors in the script where they had to be in there. These things will definitely be in there. So the crystal skull and the aliens surrounding it and the temple, it doesn't entirely make sense, or enough sense, for it to have a clear vision of what's happening. Like, even the inconsistent magnetism and how it works, and why it was separated, and who's trying to stop the skull get back there. like is the temple to stop the skull get back? Like, wouldn't they want the skull back? And then everyone's goal ends up being the same, the antagonist and protagonist, to get the skull back. And there's just something that doesn't feel clear enough about that. How do you feel about the skull and the aliens and the temple? And
okay, so I mirror everything, echo everything. Sorry, that you said about Lucas. I think the guy is an absolute legend. One of the the godfather of modern cinema. Frankly, I would say, or at least there would not be room for. I mean, there wouldn't be Indiana Jones without him. There wouldn't be the movie franchise vehicle existing without him either, to the point where you would be making a fourth Indiana Jones movie years later. You know what I mean? It's that, like, he has done so much. I mean, these are the guys that gave birth to the sector of the industry that allows these very films to exist. Like it's incredible. And yeah, all the ideas he's come up with. The only issue I have is that it's so clearly this was a Spielberg moment, this was a Lucas moment. It's so clear. You, like you said, you can see the stitching. All right, I don't hate the aliens in this. I don't have a problem with it, because to me, I always found it funny when people criticize the aliens really in Indiana Jones. And I thought, yeah, but in the first movie, there's a telephone that talks to God, apparently, according to Balak. Like, you're okay with that, or the magic stones that you can reach into a person's heart and all that. Like, really, you're okay with that? The occult and all that. And there's literally a cup where you can drink from it, and it will heal your bullet wounds. Like there's immortality in that, but it can only exist in that little seal in that temple. You break the seal, you don't get it anymore. How convenient. Like we don't want to introduce that too heavily into the universe. I have no problem with any of that. So I have no problem with the aliens. In the same way that I don't really care that much about Jar Jar Binks, because to me there are other ridiculous, like Ewoks. I mean, if you're okay with Ewoks, you have to be okay with Jar Jar Binks. Yes. I don't know. Yeah. So for me, it's like I think there's a double standard in terms of how critics piled on the alien. I think it was like an easy go-to for them. But I do agree there is a complication in it, and I think it would have been just much clearer if it was, or it could have been just much more effective if it was just a case of, these were where these skulls were found. But we believe the source of this power is in this place, is in this part of the Amazon. So we want to go there, and just keep it as simple as that. Forget about trying to reunite skulls or anything like that, and just have it be the source of this power is like, this is the hub where this power comes from. These have been found all around, but like the let's say the ground zero of this power or of this event that led to these or whatever is in this place, in the Amazon, and everyone's just trying to get there. It's like a gold rush. It's a knowledge rush or something like that.
I'm being reminded a little bit of the chat we had about Prometheus and the engineers and them leaving messages, and it's in fact they've got a plan for us arriving there. I think in that case we were like, they were going to end humanity, because if we could get to that planet, we were a threat to the galaxy, kind of thing. So in this, there are carvings and cave paintings, and actually I don't think it's cave paintings. There's carvings and things in the temples and things like that, and they're showing the development of humanity through the help of these beings. So I think they say irrigation and farming and things like that were helped by these beings, and they're like gods. So why can't they be? Why isn't a test to get us there to see what we've become? So why can't this temple be maybe a little bit more, advanced? Like, is the temple set a test by them? If we can make it to us.
Sorry, I really don't. I'm sorry to interrupt you on this. You just mentioned something that's made a huge plot hole here in the wider universe of these movies, because you talked about how, like, okay, these are the gods that inspire you, blah, 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 right? But no, the Christian God, Jesus Christ, exists in this universe.
Oh, yeah.
So, like,
creationism has been destroyed.
But can you have both in this world? Like, in this universe?
That's a good point.
Can you have... I mean, it's not like we've misinterpreted, what this power was, from the Ark of the Covenant or anything, and we maybe assigned a narrative to it or something in our history or whatever. No, it's actually like the Knights of the Crusade found the Holy Grail, the cup of Christ, the Last Supper. Jesus was a carpenter, so it's the wooden cup, blah, blah, blah. Like, the narrative is set in stone here, literally in Last Crusade as well. And can you then say that, aliens birthed civilization? Like, have they actually really dropped the ball on the aliens? Like, forget about opinions of whether you like aliens or not. Like, is this actually a serious dropping of the ball?
I think they've broken the rules of the universe a little bit, haven't they? For going back to the use of the aliens, for me, it felt a little bit too much because there was no mystery surrounding it. You know, the Ark of the Covenant, yeah, some stuff comes out and melts some Nazis, but is it God? Do we know that for sure? No, we don't know that for sure. The Holy Grail, yes. This the Christianity has surrounded that entire thing. You know, there's a crusader left there to guard it. Doesn't mean it's God. It's just that, you know, there's a mystery surrounding this. There's a magic. Whereas the aliens in this, it's just like, oh no, cool. It's all cool. It's just aliens. Look, there they are, physically in front of you, and then they disappear in a flying saucer. It's like there isn't. It doesn't leave a mystery at the end. And you know, even at the start, it slightly ruins the mystery of the end of Raiders with the Area 51. That entire warehouse, the mystery of it is now gone. Like, it's just filled with stuff. Would they have an alien just in a case buried under loads of things? Anyway, that's another that's another thing. It's just the use of the aliens for me. If you're going to go down the alien route, I feel it needs to be more suggestive than physical. Oh, was it aliens? Was that aliens? They've gone. Oh, was that what we saw? You know, it feels
and there's
like
literally a flying saucer as well at the end, isn't there?
Flying saucer. There's a grey. You know, it's all there, and it's, I don't know. You know, it's the interdimensional beings that live in the space between spaces, which is great.
They might as well have just leaned full on in and done Roswell at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they kind of did, didn't they? I mean, it was. I think they that thing that was in the weird suit I think they were trying to say that was a Roswell alien,
but it wasn't, because it came from the. No, because it wasn't that they took that skull.
It wasn't from that alien.
Oh, okay.
Because I think they looked in the back of its head and said they've all got crystal bones, and this is a, you know,
I see. Okay.
And, so I think that was the Roswell alien, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
So I think that's what they did with that, because
all right.
You know, throughout the development of the script, Lucas really wanted to do the B-movie sci-fi thing, which is cool. Like, it's great. Like, I think you can those things can be done really, really well. But I think just to put it against the other films, like, there's a lack of mystery in the MacGuffin and a lack of mystery in the creatures.
I think the biggest issue with the aliens for me is just how much of a departure it is from the other films. The other films deal with religion and spirituality, and you know, it's there's a holiness to everything. You know, you've got even, you know, down to the ritual at the end. There's a kind of a sacredness to everything, and I don't get that with this film. I get it's very much. I don't get the sense that there's something sacred or holy or devout. I don't get a sense of worship or anything that you get from the other films. And there is a significance to, you know, returning the stones in Temple of Doom is you are returning hope to civilization, you know, to that community, you know, that community will continue now because they're stronger than they were before. There is that idea of people coming into Indiana Jones, coming into people's lives, making it better and leaving. I don't get that sense with the aliens here, because it's very much that they're just bearing witness to something that also does it suffer from the same thing that Raiders of the Lost Ark suffers from, which is that if Indiana Jones had done nothing, sure, Marion would have probably died and Oxley probably would have died. But
yes,
although there's no guarantee, because actually Marion is pretty strong anyway. But wouldn't Irina have just gone to the temple and the alien would have just drained her brain anyway?
I think so. Like, I don't. That was why I was trying to lean on that test thing. That it's like, oh no, you're not suitable. You're not worthy. Yeah. We're going to just harvest you, or whatever they do with her. But I think maybe so. There's two things I'm thinking here. There's the first one I don't think would fly, because it's sort of an unforgivable thing which we've seen done in films before, where we could hook it into religion and we could suggest that the aliens have seeded the planet and they've supercharged like the prophets of religion throughout history. Like they have been chosen ones, and that is where we've seen this in a number of films where they've ended up being targets because, of course, the number of people become very upset about the suggestion that the prophets of their religion are a character in this film. Like it narratively that might work, but there's something there's something a bit iffy about that route.
But also, I think you're over explaining the world then, and I don't. It's too many. We like mystery in our world, you know. And,
so another one is really lean on the mystery. So I know we see a UFO at the end of Close Encounters, but they go on the ship and they go. We don't see inside the ship. It's just a light. It's a complete mystery of what they're going into, how big it is, what it looks like inside. They're just departing into that. Can we use that? Do we not necessarily see the aliens? Do we see a craft through a hole in the roof? Do you know what I mean? And there's something massive moving up there, but you can't make out what it is. Someone gets beamed up, they've run outside and it's gone. You know, is there a mystery surrounding these things? It's like, I'm almost certain, as in the Last Crusade, we were almost certain it was God. In this, we were almost certain it's aliens, but we didn't physically see them, and that we weren't sure that was a ship. We just saw a massive shape moving outside through the temple skylights or whatever's up there. You know,
I like that.
Mystery we can bring in.
I think that's really strong. I love the idea that, you know, Irina could say, "Okay, Indy, you're coming with me," and it's almost like we're saying our goodbyes. And when they get on the ship, or, you know, they go into the light or the temple or something, you know, like what you're describing, she, you know, something happens, and you think this is the end for Indy. Like, you build it up like this is, you know, he can't do that many more movies anyway. Yeah. So like let's build this up as if this is the end for Indiana Jones. We're handing the baton over to our, you know, his stepdaughter, you know, and Oxley's there, and like maybe a tear rolling down his eye because of the wonder of what he's seeing, but also maybe this is the end for Indy. And then suddenly Indy's the only one left. Like the thing disappears, the light is gone, Irina is gone, and Indy is left behind. And then he simply says, "I wasn't worthy."
Yes.
And she was, because she is a genius. She is potentially, you know, and Indy is a clumsy guy who's still learning his way through the world. He's not an expert. Yeah, he's a historical expert. He's read all the books in the world, but he hasn't seen every corner of the world. And he is a man whose his life, if there is any tragedy in his life, it's that he will never have all the knowledge. He will always be learning. But that's not a tragedy, you know? So that's a tragedy for Irina, you know?
There's an interesting dynamic there that she gets accepted and she's the antagonist in this film.
Yeah. And the price of that is she's gone now. She's gone.
Yeah,
now.
She's gone. But, you know, I mean, she's probably alive. You know, I would expect that through this, maybe, you know, her plan seems to be revenge or to double cross the Russians, or to whatever the hook is. We know that she's driven by something else, and maybe she says, you know, it was never about those things. It was about escape. And she goes, you know, maybe that was it. And he's like, what? And then, you know, they choose her and not him. And then you might completely reassess who the people are.
But I love the idea as well then, that from all this, that Indy has seen something that none of us will ever witness. Because that's what Indiana Jones has always, like, that's the frustration Brody always has. Like, you know, he's like, I had it, Marcus. I had it, and they took it from me, you know. You'll get it back. You know, and it's like, imagine all the times. And like when he's talking to his father, like, you know, I saw it, Dad, you know. And it's like, really? You were at the temple, or you were at the tomb of Saint whatever? And like, that's the thing. Everybody around him is like, really? And only he knows. And his job is to teach everybody what he saw, what he's found. And I love the idea then from this, that Indy has witnessed something that no one has ever witnessed for thousands of years. And he can tell them, but it'll never be the same. And he is a steward of that part of our history now, which is his thing. But also you tie it into an arc where he's found something more important, which is family.
Nice. Yeah,
And
that
so
works.
it's good that I wasn't selected. Like, I'm happy to accept the loss, that I had the opportunity for all the knowledge of the universe, and I turned it, and I was happy that I'm glad they didn't test me. And you do the cheesiest line where Marion says, "Yeah, but you're good enough for us," and it's just lovely moment then,
So that works because the motivation of the aliens as well becomes they're trying to find connection with the species, and you need to complete this set of tasks to do it. And once you do, you get they'll take you with them.
And it doesn't because you're not saying aliens at all. That's just in our imagination. Because you're not saying aliens at all, you're not overruling the potential conflict then with the religious mythology that can exist. I'm sure it can exist. I'm sure a theologian could argue why you can have extraterrestrials and
Mm.
Christian deities and so on. But
Well, how's about this? Just to close that bit about the crossover, we leave it completely mysterious. So there's no, you don't see a craft, you don't see anything. Everything could rumble, as if it could just be rumbling because the intense power that's happening in this moment, or there could be something outside. She beams up through solid rock. You don't see. She just beams up. It could be celestial. It could be spiritual. It could be advanced technology, and they run outside because they think it might have been a craft, and there's nothing there. So it's their actions that lead you to think, was it or not? What's going on? Why are they outside? We don't see aliens. That we think aliens.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Great.
I love that. And you've got to have, before the wedding, you've got to have a moment where Indy and all of them are all being interrogated in separate rooms in a kind of a comical fashion by CIA. Yeah. What did you see? What did you see? I didn't see anything. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got somewhere to be. And then you cut to the music, the wedding music.
Yeah. Nice.
I want to talk about the opening sequence.
Okay.
So I have a big problem with the idea that the Russians get into America at the height of McCarthyism and all that. These aren't Russian agents with American accents. This isn't Bridge of Spies. This isn't Black Widow, the prologue of Black Widow where they've been discovered. And, this is very much the villain in total Russian regalia, Russian military regalia, and her army, her unit, have stolen American vehicles. They've got American uniforms. They kill American soldiers. Presumably they killed others in order to get that gear in the first place. They've infiltrated Russian military bases in order to get this stuff, surely. If they didn't, then it means they brought them over somehow, which raises even more questions. This feels like it wasn't properly thought through because the implications of this are staggering. I mean, this is like a proper attack on American soil by Russians.
In the atomic era. I mean,
in the atomic era, yeah. And it's also very kind of questionable that Stalin would play that card just to chase an alien myth when he could actually steal state secrets or do something else. The reality is that at that time, there were lots of double agents and people who had been recruited over to the Russians in America at that time. There were lots of people being suspected as being agents when they weren't, and their lives were ruined, and some people were executed for it. It feels like they've completely kind of gone too far off left field with this. And what I would have done instead, this is my kind of pitch for the opening, is you go to Area 51, because you still have to have that Roswell connection, obviously, and you have it be... remember Indy says, I was part of a group of people who was brought in to consult on the Roswell find? He says that, like, you were part of a group, and that's why I want you here, right? I would actually do the Roswell investigation moment. I would have it be that Indiana Jones has been brought down with a group of experts to Area 51 in the dead of night, and he finds, let's say Mac, right? But let's say it's an American CIA agent, right? Forget about Ray Winston. And this new version of Mac, where he's CIA, he was Indy's partner in the war, his buddy in the war, his brothers in arms in the war. But now he's a careerist. He's gonna probably run for president someday, 20 years from now. He's climbed the ladder so quickly in the CIA, and he's now in charge of the Roswell cover-up. And he's brought in Indy and a bunch of guys and says, "You're here because we want you to get to the bottom of this, whatever." And then he turns on everybody and he shoots everybody dead. And then he puts a gun to Indy's head and he says, "I want you to figure this out for me," or "I need your help with something." And it turns out he's a Russian spy. He's defected. The Russians have a high-ranking CIA agent. And Indy escapes and he gets arrested and he gets questioned because they believe he's responsible. Somebody else comes in and says, "Indy is a war hero. What's the matter with you?" And then you get, I don't even know if you could do this anymore, but you get somebody who looks really similar, or you get the same actor. You probably can't get the same actor because he's way too old for the timeline, but you get the guy from the or a body double from the CIA guys who come in and Raiders, and you have him come in and say, "For many years now, we've suspected that Mac had joined, and we've been following him. We never expected he would go so far as to kill. We thought they were going to use him in order to get, and we've been feeding him misinformation. Unfortunately, he played his hand too early. We believe he's now in South America, where a large Russian force is building to search for this power. Will you come back into the agency, and will you be reactivated as an agent?" Because he was CIA during the war.
Yeah.
And worked for the US government again and stop Mac from helping the Russians get their hands on this weapon.
That's nice. I like that. There's a ticking clock there. There's a reason they have to get there.
And what is it? What's the plot? It's former CIA agent Indiana Jones has been called back into duty. And that is like...
I like it.
Think about what the imagination does there. CIA agent Indiana Jones. Wow,
So if we can still keep the CIA thing, because I think that's brilliant. If we link it back to the suggestions we've already made about Mac possibly being East German and Spalko being anti-Stalin, so what if? And exactly, Spalko can't get in there as a Russian because they'll have a nuclear war. Like, what if Spalko's guys are terrorists domestically in Russia and internationally? They're anti-Russia Russians. So I don't know where it falls, but like Chechnyan terrorists, that kind of, well, I mean, they're seen as terrorists in Russia. That kind of thing. Those Eastern European countries that got dragged behind the Iron Curtain that don't want to be there. And therefore, if Mac's East German, he would arguably be allied with them because he's anti-Russia as well. And you could still have the CIA thing going on. It gives them all almost an honourable thing they're doing, although they're doing bad things. Then we don't get...
Mac is Colin Firth from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Sorry to spoil that. And he is American, served his country for many years, but he saw things in East Germany that have changed him, and he is aligned with Irina in this.
Spalko, he's been and
he's got CIA resources at his disposal, which makes him, he's been able to get weapons or whatever, or he's been able to help her build a force in South America. And you could even tie it into the fear that the Americans had of this South America becoming becoming a communist foothold, and like, even if it's not geographically accurate, you could have, I don't know if it is, but you could have just playing into those fears a little bit, like we can't allow the Russians to set up a communist foothold in South America. What would that be like? And then it's like, we know where that's going to go. So I think, like, I just feel it does away with the nuclear fridge and it does away with, and it just keeps it simple. And it's just, you know, it gives, and it ties into again the war. You can't escape the war. All those films built up to the war, and this film just barely mentions the war at all. And it's like, you really can't. Like, you've got to. Yeah. This almost needs to be like, I'm going back to do the thing I did in the war.
I think, yeah, I love that. I think that's great. I think it gives it a real. Everyone has a real self-driven goal, and they're all clashing, and you could potentially on different days agree with different people, and I think that gives it a lot of conflict, which I think this film's lacking. So you mentioned the nuke fridge. Yeah, that would probably go if we lean less on the atomic area. I don't dislike that. It's just it should have been.
I like the
pancakes inside that fridge, right?
But isn't there? Yeah. Okay. So for me, when I watch that, I'm reminded of like a Roadrunner Coyote kind of moment totally. where it's like, you know, there's a boulder falling and he puts it up an umbrella or something in order to like, and then the boulder bounces off the umbrella, but he gets killed some other way, and it does feel like it's very much. But he plays that so well in that scene.
He does it great. I mean,
when he's fumbling with he's brilliant in it. The way he fumbles with the mannequins, and the way he just gets that shock at the idea that they're mannequins, and he fumbles with the fridge, and you get this visual of him climbing into the fridge. It's almost like, yeah, I'm dead, but I'm gonna just close the door anyway. And the spectacle of the blast is quite something. You know, it is quite visually. Like, that's Spielberg.
Yeah, the mushroom cloud where he stands in front is just breathtaking. It's amazing.
That is cool.
Maybe we could lean in. Maybe we lean into the atomic thing. Maybe he thinks the terrorists are there to get nukes, and in fact they're there to get the skull.
Okay, all right. Here's how you keep the nuclear blast without the fridge. Right? You have the atomic blast in the distance be the thing that allows our new version of Mac to get away. Like I need to take shelter. Like, our fight has somehow managed to get kind of within the blast radius, and there's a bunker, and you can you can't stay here in or we're all dead. Like, and you just have this ticking clock moment where it's like, you know.
So I think you've just touched on something that was an intended thing anyway. Like, the nuclear test is cover for them to get in that base, right? Because they've cleared the base. They say when they go in the door, this base is cleared for weapons testing. They don't discuss it. They just kind of go in, and then later on a giant bomb goes off. Maybe that's the whole thing. You know, maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe they have to get in and out before the bomb goes off because they're not going to be able to cross a certain play. You know, or, you know, is there a ticking clock of a nuclear weapon going off? Obviously, it can't destroy the hangar because that would kind of ruin it a little bit. But yeah, that could definitely be in there somewhere. I think we're gonna have to try and wrap it up a little bit now. I think we've gone on for quite a while. We've come up with a lot of solutions. I think the last two outstanding things are the jungle chase. Arguably, that might have been a different approach if it was Marion Ravenwood.
I'm not bothered, I'm not bothered by the jungle chase. It's, you know, it does feel typical Indiana Jones to me. I think
there's a level of conceit that you need for it, though. Like, it's a bit of a mess, like the thing chopping the path for them, and then they destroy it, but there's still a path there, like, and the vine swinging faster than, you know, 50, 60 miles an hour.
The vine swinging just needs to go. Forget about it. There's no need for it, and they just don't need to be separated. Simple as that. And the snake, which we mentioned, the snake is just so stupid. It's so stupid. It's the most contrived way of getting Indiana Jones to just have a snake. And I think what would have been so much more interesting is if he's just walking through the tree, you know, through the jungle, and he just has this panic moment with a snake and throws it on a Russian soldier by accident, and just, you know, or something, or throws it and then you hear into a bush and you hear a scream, and then Mac is in the bushes or something like that. I don't know.
Well, like, I didn't dislike his reaction to the snake being thrown at him, because it is a ridiculous thing to do. What if Marion Jr., we'll call her, throws him the snake, and he's like, "I'm not touching that. No way. I can't." No, and she's like, "What? I didn't know you were scared of snakes." And Marion's like, "Oh, for God's sake!" And she holds him like a palm leaf or something, and he gets out that way. You know,
I just don't want to do the snake at all. I just think it's so. it's just, I just hate it. I really hate it. I just think, here's the thing. The snake is only something that the fear of snakes is only something that came in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just that one moment they show him with the snake in the plane, and then oh crap, he's in a temple full of a tomb full of snakes. That was it. That's it. It's not a core part of who he is as a character. It never comes up in Temple of Doom. Oh, it does. It comes up once in Temple of Doom where he's like, snake, snake, and then she just throws snake away. But again, it doesn't mean it has to be a joke in every movie. It's not a joke, I don't think, in Last Crusade. I think the rats is the thing they do in Last Crusade. But I just feel if that's the best you can come up with, you're in a jungle,
You could counter it. I mean, arguably it wouldn't be well received because you're changing Indy then, but maybe there's a scene with a snake and he just deals with it. And she's like, "I thought you were scared of snakes." Says, "No, I got hypnosis. It's all the rage these days." Is the could you
The quicksand I think is cool because there's a great back and forth between him and Marion while Shia LaBeouf goes away. There's that wonderful, brilliant back and forth that is just one of the best little exchanges in the whole franchise. But I would just, the kid, whoever it is in this version, just uses the whip. And it's like, he can be like, well, look, it's harder than it looks. And then she just does it naturally. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
well,
great.
Well. And there you go. You've literally, like, you're extending what is meant to be a rope in order to get Indy out. You have a whip. Like, surely that can just get used. Like, just get the whip into Shia LaBeouf's hand or whoever into their possession prior to that moment and just show that you can use that. And then you tick the vine swinging scene and that scene all at once.
Wonderful.
Anyway.
Okay, I think we've nailed those. The fifth point was about side characters and side stories, but I think we've solved all of those in the previous 4 points. I think we've gone through everything. So I'm going to recap really quickly. So we want Indy to be a little bit older, maybe a Murtaugh kind of character, that he's still pretty tough, but he's older and he can't do the stuff he used to do. Not just saying it, physically doing it. And maybe he's upstaged by who he thinks is his daughter now a few times, and he does get bloodied and he does get grubby, and he's still really battered, and maybe his back hurts, or all of these things that we know from this archetype of the older cop kind of thing. So I think that covers the point one of Indy being supernaturally indestructible. The second one's the characterization of the villains and what surrounds their motivation. So I think everything we've said ties it back into the Second World War, which will have been a massive thing in all of their lives. And there's this really rich, thick backstory they were all on the same side, and that will bond them together, although they'll be against each other. Max, CIA, but he's aligned with Spelko, who's in fact anti-Stalin, and they're terrorists. They're a splinter cell. They're dangerous. They're military trained, but the treatment in the Second World War by the Nazis and their own government, like, for them, drove them to this. They don't want to be part of this anymore, and then it gives them a really within themselves an honest reason that they're doing this. They have a real drive. The aliens themselves are, that they could have. We don't know if it's definitely aliens or not. There's a suggestion they are, and there's a suggestion that this temple has been left to test us to get there to see who's the best. She wants to do that. She wants to become whatever's going to be offered. Whether it's divine or extraterrestrial, whatever it is, she wants to get there. But for her, it's about escape rather than acquiring power. And she's chosen over Indy. So she was a Russian sniper. She's now a terrorist, but they deem her as more worthy because of her ideals. And that gives Indy a big question. But to the point of his family, Mutt is his daughter, or he thinks that Mutt is his daughter. It's Marion Ravenwood's daughter. And he knows that early on, and he presumes that she's his daughter throughout. And he tries to protect her, old-fashioned sort of man-protecting woman, but she doesn't need it. She asks him to stop. She upstages him a lot, and it turns out that he's not her biological father, but in marrying Marion, he's adopting her. So that's where we deal with the Mutt issue, and then I think the Lucas MacGuffin problems we've tied back into the aliens / maybe not aliens motivations and even potential existence. We don't know. It's a mystery as in the other one. Something happens to suggest it might be aliens. There may be a craft outside, that this may have been left by otherworldly beings, or it could be divine. We don't know this. And it leaves a thread of mystery running through the middle of the film.
I just want to commend, before we wrap up, 2 great moments by John Hurt in this film. The late, great John Hurt. When they're sitting after the spaceship is flown away, and Shia LaBeouf says, "Come on, Dad," or something like that. And then he says something like "son" or something in response. And John Hurt goes, "Dad? Son?"
That's good.
And then everyone has, and he does it so well, and everyone has this great laugh. And then Indy says, "Somewhere up there, your grandpa is laughing." And I love that line. I love it so much. It's such a beautiful inclusion of the other characters that the story has lost. Like it's like they're all there, just sitting there on the rock. Sean Connery as well.
I think there's more weight to it now. Now Sean Connery's passed as well. There's a lot more weight to it now than there was at the time.
Yeah, and the other one is, and I love it. It's at the wedding itself, and he says, John Hurt says something along the lines of, "So much of time is wasted in waiting." And if that does not make you want to just go out there and profess your love to that person that you've never, you were too cowardly to, to talk to or something, like, that's just like one amazing line, to motivate you in life, and it's just, there are some beautiful gems in this film. There really are.
Really? I mean, it's constructed of some fantastic set pieces, amazing performances. It's part of like a wider franchise, which is just, it's going to go down, or it already has gone down in living memory as one of the greatest franchises in movie history. Just everything about it has been magic. Just, I think this film had a number of missteps that were almost like another perfect storm of, I don't even want to say mistakes. It was just things that clashed with one another and didn't necessarily work structurally for the characters and for the conceit of the film, in tonally for the relation to the other films, that there's a thread of mystery.
I've got one more point for you before we wrap up, right?
Go for it, John.
So right next week, I think, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the TV series, starts. Hayden Christensen's coming back. It's no surprise. He's been heavily in the marketing and the promotion for it. He's been interviewed about how great it's been coming back and all that. 10, 15 years ago, if I had said to somebody, "Oh, Hayden Christensen will reprise his role as Anakin someday," everyone would have either said no, or they would have said, "Never in a million years is it actually going to happen."
Did you just do the no from Return of the
Maybe I did. Maybe I subconsciously did.
No!
Maybe I subconsciously did. I hate myself now for that. Here's a question for you. In 20 years, does Shia LaBeouf reprise his role? And do we all go, yes?
I don't know.
Because that's kind of how we react these days, isn't it?
There's a chance he sealed that fate himself, though. I don't know. I don't know if he wanted to, or they want him to come back now. I think there was a little bit of a clash somewhere. But
we love a redemption story, don't we? And you know what?
God, yeah. I mean, it could be a wonderful thing that happened. Yeah. It's like, oh, what? That is actually going to happen. Wow. And
if I told you Tobey Maguire was going to put on the Spider-Man suit again, you would never believe it.
You know what I mean? Thought that. Yeah. And I screamed at the screen. I screamed at it. So yes, maybe that
it is a very it is highly likely. Like, it's not even a case where it could happen. It's likely that someday there'll be an Indiana Jones property and Shia LaBeouf will make an appearance.
I think they'll consider it. Okay, they'll consider it.
Okay. But that's my point. Cool. That's my point. You really can't tell anymore, can you?
Yeah. It's a whole new world. A whole new world of Disney, I think. Right, thank you very much, John. That was a pleasure.
Really, yeah.
And Yeah, it was a real pleasure. And thanks for listening, guys. This has been The Great Hollywood Rewrite from the Script Department. Please check out the website at thescriptdepartment.net for more conversations like this. Take a look at our social media. The links are in the description. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search The Script Department and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for a film or TV show you'd like us to look at next week, just hit us up in the comments or message us directly. We look forward to hearing what you come up with. Nice one.